Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to another episode of A Canadian Investing in the U.S. This week, my guest is Pete Palermo. Pete, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I live in Hamilton, Ontario, born and raised here by way of had little stops in Niagara Falls and lived in Orlando for a bit.
Yeah.
Real estate agent, have been for a while, and I invest in the USA.
You mentioned that you lived in Orlando for a bit. Did that get you, was it for employment? Like, did you get an SSN or?
Yeah, I had a TN visa. So a little background, my parents moved there after I graduated high school.
Yeah.
Just wasn't the right time for me, so I stayed back. Then I got married, had my first kid, and then we decided to give it a shot.
Okay. So you said you have an I-10 rather than the social security number, right?
I had a social security number, but once you lose your visa, once you leave, you have to give it up. So now I have an I-10.
Okay. It's too bad for all the U.S. investing.
I've used SSN for everything over there. So yeah.
They love it. So you did a bit of your story there. Let's talk about the real estate investing story.
Yeah. So I guess it's sort of my first rental was not by choice. So like I said, when I moved to Florida, I moved there 2006, around there. We built our house. And I remember standing right in front of it, I think it was November. And I was saying to myself, it was in the height of the craziness, right before the crash. So standing in front of it, I remember saying to myself, we should sell this thing because we can make probably like 200 grand. But I was waiting for my wife and kid to come and meet me. So that wasn't an option.
Yep.
We moved in. I think it was like maybe 3 months later, the crash happened. It was literally like you woke up one morning and you didn't know what hit you. It was insane. So what happened was, long story short again, we lived there for a few years. The wife wanted to come back to Canada, so we did. Tried to sell the house, couldn't, because again, it was right in the middle of all that crap.
Yep.
And so we ended up renting it.
Yep.
Had to hold it or rent it for about 8 years before it actually, the value got back up to what it cost for me to build, not buy. If we bought, we would have been totally screwed, but we built.
Yep.
So it still took 8 years to get us back to even. So we did sell it 8 years later.
Okay.
And then, so that was my first rental. So I rented it for about 8 years. And then.
And how did your rental go? Like it would cash flow. It actually would make money more than okay.
We rented it for about, this was back in, I'll say 2010, I started renting it.
Yeah.
I think we're getting $1,450 for a 3-bed, 2-bath, 2,000 square feet.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot about the type of tenants I want too from that. Like what I started with, like what I see a lot of new time investors do now, they want the 700 plus credit score, amazing salary, great credit history. And I did that for the first 2 or 3, and I found out they're just using my place as a stop until they buy a place.
Yeah. So you had more
every
turnover.
year. Yeah. So every year it was like clockwork. They left. And I was like, okay, screw this. I'm going to try out something. So now I'm like, I don't care if it's 500. I look for 500, between 500 and 600 credit score, and a decent job. And that when I've done that, my tenants stayed for 3 years. And in my other places, same thing. They've stayed for more than 2 or 3 years each.
So, you know what? That's a great tip.
And yeah, so you learn the hard way, whatever.
Yeah.
And they're great tenants. So it's.
So how do
perfect.
you run these things? Do you use property management, or do you still like self-manage them because you were there, or?
Yeah, I self-manage them, and my parents still live there, right? So I do have that to lean back on, but I do know a property manager in the area if I needed it. But basically the way it works, I have a bank account at a small US bank there. I'll say small, it's just mainly in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
And they have a program called Zelle. It's like our e-transfer.
Okay. Yep.
So I just get the rent deposited automatically to that. If something happens, they call me. Like recently, I got a handyman and some plumbers, electricians. I just call them, go fix it, and pay them through that Zelle app.
That works.
So it's working so far. The only thing where it might come in, right, especially now during Corona, is if you have to find a new tenant, right? Like usually I would why not fly down there? It used to be a cheap flight through Swoop.
Yep.
I mean, why not go, especially right now in February, fly to Florida for a week or two just to find some tenants.
Yeah.
But now you're sort of screwed, right? So if I didn't have my parents, like they just meet the people there. But then I would probably, especially right now, use the property managers for that.
Right. And this Zelle app, like, is it like it's kind of like the email money transfer, right? Like, is it
so e-transfer, exactly.
Yeah, so you just need their email address.
Yeah.
Because like some of them, I have some with my bank, but a lot of times you need more information, which sometimes it works for certain kinds of transfers and it doesn't. Like if you're going to pay contractors, they're always okay to give you like a bank account number to deposit, but some people are like, no.
Yeah, I know. That's, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Like the last guy I called, I never met him, right?
Yeah.
I found him on Facebook. I went to one of those Facebook groups for the city and just asked for some recommendations. I got like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So I called 2. One of them answered me, and I was like, I thought he'd think I'm some scammer. I don't know. Go show up to this house. Never met you, and I'll pay you when you're done.
Yeah.
But he was fine with it because it was only a few $100, I guess. But it worked pretty good. So yeah, it's exactly like e-transfer. Basically, I just need their cell phone number. I guess their bank has to support it, right? It's not like banking in the States is different than here, right? Here we got the top 4 banks that all do the same thing.
Yeah.
There's so many different banks, and they're not as big, so they can't pour that money into technology like they do in Canada.
Yep.
So yeah, their bank has to support it.
Right. Okay, so you had these properties for a bunch of years. Some of them, I guess, the first one you would have bought while you were there, so you would have had your social security number for that at that point, right?
Yeah.
So,
right.
So that way, when you have lots of options for the other one, were you using your ITIN for the purchase, or were you still using some other?
Okay. Yeah. So these 2 that I have now,
yeah.
So subsequent to the house that I had, I used my ITIN. Yeah. So which is pretty easy, but again, I did it there, right? So I went to a accountant.
Yeah.
So again, while I was there, I had to call. I use this philosophy for everything. Like you always have to call at least 3 people before you get someone who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So I called 3 accountants. The first 2 had no idea what I was talking about, even though they advertised it on the web.
Yeah.
And so I finally got a hold of one. Went there, did it. It was quick. Had my passport. They did it within half an hour and $200, I think it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had it like a couple weeks later. And I've used that one ever since. So yeah, I do the end of the year, I file my taxes in the US.
Cool. So then if you're using your ITIN then for lending, are you using a Canadian bank, using some of the American banks, maybe your previous history you had with the other bank?
No, I wish I still had my credit score's gone because I've been gone for so long in the States.
Right.
So I did call my bank that I banked with, and I got a horrible, I think it was 8% and a 4-1 ARM, which I'm looking to take advantage of in the States, especially for rentals, the 30-year, the rate that never changes, right?
Yep.
So that I could not get with an American bank. So I called, at that point, this was a few years ago, TD and RBC were the only ones I knew of.
Yep.
So again, I called RBC, called 3 people because the first person I got at RBC gave me the same spiel, like 8%, 4-1 ARM. I'm like, no, I'm Canadian. I'm looking for the 30-year mortgage. Like, no, we can't do that for you. So I called another person. They said the same thing. So I said, okay, forget RBC. So I called TD.
Yeah.
And right away, the first person was like, yeah, we can do it. 30-year. At that time, citizens were getting 4%.
Yeah.
So me as an investor out of state, they said, I'll give you 5% at 30-year.
Okay. So
I said, sure, I'll take that.
Yeah.
And I called recently for another one, and the recent rate it got over the phone was 3.8.
Yeah, no, it's going. Everything's going down right now for both
I know.
countries. So so you're buying them there, and then you did like it was a full like 30-30. It wasn't. There's no arms, no nothing.
Nope. Yeah, no, because I didn't want that. Just first, because I'm not there, and second, just as a rental, I find it valuable to know your costs forever, right? I mean, rents are always going to go up.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And yes, the rates are going down now. Yeah, sure, but you never know, they could go up. So for my rentals, I just like to have the steady fixed forever.
Oh, I totally agree. I preach the same thing because I'm like, you know what? You can always break that, right? And if some catastrophe, some sort of great recession comes again, you'll have financing that makes it through that period. It's not going to
Right.
expire and you're looking for financing when there isn't any.
Right.
You don't want that.
And I'm not sure about it, but I think I understand to refly in the States, I don't think there's a fee, or at least there's not a disgusting crazy fee like we have here.
Yeah, the refis still have one, depending on how you do
Do
it.
they?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm usually paying for a loan origination fee and then points, so it can add up, and it's reasonable if you as the properties get more expensive. But when you get
Right.
cheap, a lot of them are flat fees, and you're like,
Yeah.
man, I just paid $2,500 for a loan origination fee. You're like,
Right.
wow, on a cheap house, that's a lot, right?
Right.
Percentage wise. So since you did TD, I'm guessing, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing you had to personally guarantee this loan. It wasn't like based to a corp. I don't think the Canadian banks would do it to the corp.
Yes. So even for tax purposes, I don't have a corp. I am looking into it to
Mhm.
see if it's better. Like there's no LLC or nothing.
Yep.
But as I get more, I'm going to look into it more. But I'm just basically, filing as an individual.
Cool. And what were some of the criteria they gave you for this loan? Like, did they say, you probably had a certain, you may not even know this, but I never knew when I was doing my Canadian investing, but like, was it a certain debt service ratio? They were doing all that qualification, like just like you were in Canada, right?
Yeah, behind the scenes, I don't know exactly what they went through, but even right now, like the first mortgage agent I used at TD, I've tried calling him for the past 3 months, emailing, never got a call back.
Yeah.
So I had to call somebody else. So this woman, she's actually from Toronto, and TD moved her to Naples in Florida, just for this to handle Canadians.
Yeah.
So she said, yeah, I can just over the phone, I'll give you the 3.8, but I still have to do all my digging into your credit. But yeah, so they do all that in the background for sure. But they take your Canadian, like they go to Equifax Canada for your credit score. And then I sent all my, same as here, my employment, my T4s, my everything.
Cool. And then did they, is there restrictions on how many loans you can get with like these Canadian banks?
Yeah, so they count your primary in Canada as one, and you're allowed 4 total, including your 1 primary in Canada.
Okay.
So that's where you get maxed out, right?
Yeah, they get maxed out quick.
Yeah.
So, and then I wonder if I'm just thinking about myself personally, if they would count ones that are in corporations, or they would consider that like a whole different thing. I guess I'd have to have the conversation with TD probably.
Yeah.
But,
but my thought is, if whether it's right or wrong, I mean, I'm getting 3 and 4% as opposed to 8. So I'll max out my 4 with them.
Yep.
And then move on to, I'm gonna call Desjardins. I'm gonna call them because I know you mentioned that too, right? So
yeah,
which I never thought of.
When I was talking to Mark Younger, he was saying that there's a lot of the Canadian banks are down there. A lot of them. What's tricky is some of them have changed their name when they're in the U.S. So,
right.
So I know that. Well, I've heard that CIBC has an equivalent, but it's not called CIBC at all. Yeah. And
I think they buy someone else, and just keep the name. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And so then there's the Desjardins, National, HSBC, Royal Bank, and TD Bank, and BMO Harris. I think that's the list. If someone's listening to this and I missed one, put it in the comments, because I'm sure a lot of other people will be interested in this, having that information. So that's kind of the lending process. Oh, how long do they take to close these things? When I was talking to, I think Royal Bank, they were saying no, it's TD. I was talking to TD, and it was like 3 months to close a loan. Is that accurate?
No. So what they did tell me now is, right now in the States, they've never seen this many refi requests in their history. So if there's a 3-month backlog for that, they told me.
Okay.
But that's another thing too. So for TD, I got to say it went smoothly. I have nothing bad to say about it. It was a really good process. I'd recommend using TD if you're going to go that way.
Yeah.
But that's another thing too. So the mortgage process, but also the buying process, is totally different in the States than in Canada. So I don't know if you want to go into that, but
yeah, let's do it.
So we were talking about the mortgage process, how here we got to renew every 5 years. There it's 30 years, same percentage.
Yeah.
But when you buy in Canada, let's say it's March 1st, you put an offer, you got 5 days in a normal market. You got 5 days to say, I'll get my financing all in order. Yeah. And then within that 5 days, it's done, and you're going to close 99.9% of the time when your closing date comes. which is usually 60 days. So March 1st, I buy the house. March 5th, everything's all cleared. My financing is good, and I'll move in May 1st.
Yeah.
In the States, it's totally different. You basically put in an offer, and you say, I'll give you this much, and we'll close in, it's usually 45 to 60 days. Mine was, I did 45.
Okay.
So from offer date March 1st, you're moving in April 15th, we'll say.
Okay.
The banks don't even look at it until April 1st. So in the States, the saying, if the sale's not done until the check's in the mail is true. So you can, April 1st, they'll look at it and it could die April 13th because your financing isn't good. And the sellers have wasted 45 days waiting for you. So I've talked to agents there and they said they wish they had it, their process the way we did it. So I found that different, right? That was totally different, totally unexpected. I had to learn that as I went. I was asking questions of everybody. And so basically learned that difference.
Well,
So,
it's a huge difference. And like, I just went through the same thing when I was flipping a property, and the first seller, we've waived all the conditions. We're ready to close. And you wait a while and they're like, yeah, our financing fell through. We're done. And we're like,
yeah.
Wait, what? We're like, we've taken this thing off the market.
Right. And that's what's crazy. So yeah, you're taking a gamble almost with every person you deal with. So that was a big difference for me.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons they say cash is king in the U.S., right? Like,
yeah.
if the person's closing cash, it's a much more certain that it's going to happen.
Yeah. And yeah, those are two sayings that are different, right? Cash in Canada just means I'm not adding a financing clause.
Oh, I know another difference too, is sometimes like, this is the closing date, and in Canada, that's the closing date. And in the US, it could be 3 days later or whenever the lender gets their act together and are ready to close.
Right. Which is, so that's, and if you're used to buying in Canada, selling in Canada, and that happens, you could be like sued. Stressing out, right?
Oh yeah.
Because you think, oh my God, I'm gonna get sued or something's gonna happen because it didn't close. But no, that's just normal process there.
I know. It terrified me, some of my first properties, because I was like, oh my God, if the lender's not ready, and I'm like, what?
I know.
Like, what's gonna happen?
I know. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, don't worry about it. What are you stressed out for?
Yeah, they're all calm as a cucumber. You're like, how are you so calm?
I know.
Yeah, no, it's a different world, but that's awesome. Cool. So, anything else you want to tell us about your story, your lending, or anything else?
No, and the reason I chose the States too, at the time, Canada, trying to find a single family that cash flows. Like, I know here a lot of people don't really look at cash flow too closely, because they count on the appreciation.
They appreciate so well.
Yeah. So, but my thinking was, I want the cash flow just in case something happens. I want that buffer there. So that was why I looked there. So yeah, because the places I got there, they're townhouses.
Yep.
3-bed, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet, no garage, but 2-car parking right in front.
Yeah.
Got them for one really cheap, and then my one I got last year was 130.
Yeah.
And renting it out for 1,250. And already rent's gone up to, I could probably get 1,350 if they left, or if I wanted to raise it.
Yeah.
So,
speaking of that, you're in Florida, right? So what's the rules on raising rent there?
Do what you want.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm pretty sure it's like a lot of the states where it's, at least all the landlord-friendly states I pick, usually it's Alabama's a little different, but most of them are 30 days notice, and you raise it whatever you like. Yeah. Alabama, you can raise it whatever you like, but on lease renewals. It's like semi-contract state, so this is your contract for 1 year. When the contract's up, it's a whole, it's void.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's another difference, right? Where it's a big difference if you have rentals here to there. Also, the eviction process, I haven't had to do it yet, but I've heard it's pretty easy. You give them a 9-day notice and then call the sheriff, and the actual sheriff, which is like the cops, and then and that's all you do.
Yep. And that's the perk of Florida. Evictions are different everywhere, but they're like listed in the top 5 for evictions.
Yeah. And I chose Florida too, one, because I know it. Like, I've lived there. I even, the area that I have my rentals, I lived 10 minutes away. So I know the area. And it's growing, right? Everybody's taken off to Florida, and they have been for like the past 10 years, especially right now, because it's the only place that's open almost. So even within the States, not only is it warm, it's an awesome place to live. Like I can vouch for that because I did it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always growing. People are always, I think it's the top 5 states, I think, where people are migrating to. And it has been for quite a while.
That's great. Which market did you pick in Florida? Like,
what do you mean?
Like Jacksonville, Tampa,
Oh,
Miami, whereabouts are you?
I'm just outside Orlando.
Outside Orlando. Okay.
Yeah. Like it's considered, it's a suburb, 10-minute drive, you're at Disney. So
nice. The tricky part about right around there is certain counties you can Airbnb and certain counties you can't. But I guess you're doing long-term holds, so it doesn't matter anyway. Yeah.
Airbnb, I would think there's a lot more, like remotely, it's a lot more work, right? You definitely need a property manager, I would think.
Yeah. Probably. Everyone, I'm always surprised what some people can pull off, but
that's true. Yeah.
But you think about it, like for Airbnb compared to what you're doing, right? You still need like a handyman in your pocket, right? You'll need, or like, all the different sort of trades for what could go wrong that you could run somebody over. And then it's just like move in, as long as you get some automated locks or something, and you could, have some sort of way of changing it. You have internet there probably. I think almost every Airbnb has their internet now.
And a cleaner, I guess.
And a cleaner. I think the cleaner is the big thing.
Yeah.
But if you're in Orlando, there's probably cleaners everywhere.
And I would assume that'd be an amazing spot for the Airbnb, right? Because of Disney. So Universal and everything. So that would, something to look into for sure.
Yeah. Who knows? That's all we were like thinking about, like maybe getting like a 4-unit or something, like, and then Airbnb one or two of them, and then having 1 or 2 long-term ones, and just so that we got a little bit of even, and we got a little bit of high and low, and a little bit of everything, just to try and smooth out the edges, right? That's the hard part with, you only have with a couple properties, you're like, it's to risk it all on Airbnb, or it's a big jump.
I'm so amazed here. I know some Airbnbs in residential areas that are always booked. I'm like, you think who would want to rent here every week? But it's always full.
Yep. Same here in Ontario. Like I was even like debating, like I debated, but I didn't want to actually live with tenants in my basement. But I'm like, I got like right where I'm sitting right now, I got a lot of square footage here, and I'm like, and it's finished. I'm like, and a side door, I could put a side entrance. Anyway, that's a totally different subject. But people rent their basements, and they rent them out consistently. And
no, for sure. And that's the way to do it here, right? I want to start doing things here too, but it would be duplexing probably. Just because, again, you have to. There's no other choice in Ontario. You can't just. It's hard to find a single family where you're actually close to cash flowing, where you're not bleeding money. So that is something I'm looking into here. I want to start soon.
Yeah, no, it is a great strategy that works. There's always a couple things that like people always think I'm not going to preach all U.S. stuff. There's a couple strategies that work really well in Ontario, and one is duplex conversions. Like those work phenomenal. And people always like, do you do that in the States? I'm like, no, because people don't want to live in the basement, or there's no basements.
Right, Florida, no.
Yeah. We were looking at.
I mean,
Florida.
here,
go ahead.
Here, the depreciation is crazy, right? So it's good to have both. The States, I just find the state having things in the States is also sort of an insurance policy, just because prices, even now, they are seeing some multiple offers, but they're not getting 200 grand over. I'm talking like they're getting 10 grand over, 20 grand over, and that's rare for them in Florida. So it gives you that insurance policy where the prices do remain the same, and if anything, like the crash, they go down, but you're still getting the same. The rents never change. That's one thing. As I said, I was getting $1,450 in the middle of the crash for a 2-bedroom, which our 3-bedroom house, which is not too far off in Florida for what you get now. Maybe, I don't know, I haven't looked into the detached, but you might get 16 to 2 grand, which is not much, right? So the rents do not, even with the real estate crash and sale prices, the rents pretty much always stay the same.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Pete, people wanted to get a hold of you. What's the best way to do so?
I got my website, I guess, palermore.com, which is PALERMORE for real estate.com. It's got my cell on there, email, all that good stuff.
And you said
I'm on Facebook.
You said you're a realtor too, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So you can
Remax,
call Pete up and he can find you some duplex conversions for you.
There you go. For sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Pete. I really appreciate it. We haven't ever so far, like, I don't know what we're up to. When this airs, it'll probably be 150 episodes. And we've never really talked about the Canadian banks in the US, which is great that we finally touched on that. It's a big topic.
Yeah. And it's the only way you're getting reasonable rates, really, right? When I say reasonable, I mean below 5, which do make a difference, right? So,
yeah.
Like I said, the first time when I first moved there, this was not even an option. Like, there was no Canadian banks there. So now it is. So, and I've no problems at all. It was a smooth process, and I totally recommend it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Pete.
All right. Thanks.